Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. And in today's video we are talking about threat. Threat, or aggro if you play other MMOs, is a mechanic that effectively determines which member in your squad the AI enemies will focus on. The person that generates the most threat is the one that gets targeted, or at least that's how it's supposed to work. However, in the current game, not factoring in the PTS, threat just doesn't work. The developers have acknowledged this, and in week 3 of the PTS, they quote-unquote updated the ways that NPCs react to player threat, now allowing players to more predictably manage enemy aggro. And with that being said, naturally, I wanted to test this to see if it actually worked, because this is something that I've wanted to do since launch, ever since I made my very first tank build video, and the results are actually pretty good. So if you guys do enjoy this video, then a like would be super appreciated, and comment down below if you have any questions. Now to begin with, before I dive into the test itself, let me start by explaining what I'm working with. To try and get the most even results possible, I tested this with Gabe, and we both created new characters. Now in the week 3 PTS, if you create a new character, you get a basic gear score 229 build, fully decked out in high ends. For the most part, characters you create are relatively similar, so both myself and Gabe are working with almost identical builds. Plus, I also removed all weapon mods too, because as you know, some weapon mods have threat generation, others have threat reduction, but for the purposes of this test, I want to work solely with the skills and nothing more. So this, as you can see here, is what I am working with. Now based on the recent patch notes, if you want to generate threat using skills, then here are your options. You either have the ballistic shield, no matter which mod, will generate threat when you deploy it, and when you shoot whilst holding the shield. And you also have the mobile cover skill with the extension mod. This also generates threat when you use this cover, but only the extension mod. As for threat reduction, your options are smart cover with the concealment mod, pulse with the scrambler mod, and mobile cover with the countermeasure mod. So, for the purposes of this video, we're going to attempt to juggle aggro by alternating between threat generation skills and threat reduction skills. And it's fair to say that out of all the available options, Ballistic Shield is going to be the most appealing given the mobility. So, to begin with, we both have the Ballistic Shield with the reactive targeting mod, simply because that's the one that gives it the most health, and we also have smart cover with concealment on. I'm conducting these tests using the beginning of Lexington because it's relatively open, it has a predictable group of enemies, and it also gives us open cover, i.e. cover where the enemies can still see us but we can deploy the smart cover on so as to test it. I'm also on normal mode to begin with simply because the shield will last longer because the enemies deal less damage, but threat works the same regardless of enemy difficulty. Now the test itself is actually pretty simple. We're going to start out with one of us deploying the ballistic shield and firing our gun in the general vicinity of the enemies. We're not aiming to shoot them because we don't want to kill them, we just want to shoot near them to generate aggro. Meanwhile, the other player will then sit on cover inside smart cover. Both of us will be in clear view of the enemy, so the person in smart cover will not be behind cover, they will instead just simply be on the side of this van. But if threat works, then while shooting I should be able to draw all or most of the fire away from my teammate, in turn holding the aggro. Then shortly after, we will tag out, I will discard my shield, move to the smart cover, Gabe will then deploy his shield, and all the attention that was previously on me should migrate to him. This is very basic aggro management, or threat juggling. In essence, if person A generates more threat than person B, then the enemy should focus on person A. But if person B then generates more threat, the attention of the enemies should switch. And as you can see in the background, that does indeed work. Quite well, in fact. We then did the exact same thing with mobile cover. Remember that the extension mod, i.e. the longer one, is the one that generates threat, meanwhile countermeasure is the one that reduces it. Sitting side by side, for the most part I'm able to maintain aggro or attention of the enemies. It's a little bit harder with mobile cover because the enemies do begin to rotate and flank around you, so truth be told, if you were trying to tank, this likely wouldn't be your go-to option, but it does still work. And if we then swap covers, we're able to transfer enemy attention. I purposefully left Pulse out of this test simply because, given the proximity, it would just tag both of us and it would have the opposite effect, because we're not trying to reduce threat from both of us, we of course want one to generate. Now we tested this for quite some time, with different combinations and moving up to higher difficulty tiers, and the short answer is that yes, threat does indeed work. However, the way it works in Division is a little bit different to your conventional aggro system in something like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars or any other MMO for that matter. See, in something like World of Warcraft, it's quite clean cut. A lot of the time, general trash mobs, also known as ads, are these mindless creatures that attack the target with most aggro. Providing you're generating enough aggro, then they will for the most part not look elsewhere. Hence why you can see things like warriors or tank classes just sitting in the middle of a massive swarm of enemies. However, in the Division, given the somewhat realistic setting, threat doesn't quite work like that. There's an element of intelligence behind the enemies. Sure, if I'm front and center with my ballistic shield shooting and generating threats, then I'm able to draw the focus of most of the enemies. However, when they begin to rotate and flank, if an enemy gets too far away, they're not just going to mindlessly shoot at me like some kind of Warcraft goblin just because I have my shield out. They will instead shoot at whichever target they have a clear line of sight on. So, while you won't always be able to attract the attention of absolutely every enemy in the vicinity simply by firing off rounds and waving a shield, you can certainly hold and draw aggro away. And as you can see here, it is even possible to turn the enemies away from a teammate and get them to follow you. Use this to then move them, and you are beginning to do what is known as kiting. Kiting the enemies is when you effectively get aggro, and you then use the aggro to lead them away. So in summary, yes, threat does work in patch 1.4, and yes, it is possible to manage and juggle aggro with sensible use of skills. Note that this is also without any weapon mods. Were I spec to, say, generate yet more threat with my weapons, then it would of course help even more. But the question now remains, is this actually useful? I mean, when you think about most activities, there isn't, for the most part, a need for a dedicated tank. Underground, challenge mode missions, most of these are pretty easy to just work your way through with a team of DPS players using cover. Even incursions, the fact that tanking in the conventional sense hasn't been a thing since launch and people have got through the toughest activities goes to show that it certainly isn't necessary. However, that doesn't mean to say that there can't be a use for it. Take something like Clear Sky, the incursion from 1.2. Having a threat generation tank would have been a great way, had it worked then, to have taken the focus off of the person carrying the box. It would have made it a downside easier, you could have drawn a lot of the fire away, and it would have probably meant that a lot more teams would have completed things. Although, truth be told, as the game currently exists, given the shotgunners, the shields wouldn't have lasted more than 2 shots. But the point is, there are situations where tanking would have been useful. And if you then go to look at 1.4, where enemies are much more balanced and skills like Ballistic Shield actually do offer some value, then yes, the notion of tanking is indeed possible. And yes, people could begin to assume more defined roles like this in a team. As mentioned, whether it's necessary, well, that is something for a future video. For the time being, I just wanted to test whether threat actually worked, and whether aggro management or threat juggling was indeed possible, which it is. Now that I know that, I can move on to test a proper tank build, but I've just got to make that first, so expect that test at some point in the future. For the time being, that is it. Test complete. Threat works. Good job. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. If you guys did, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions. But until next time, take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.